It's an interesting time. My initial thought coming out of the election was that everybody's preset narrative was kind of wrong. That if you wanted to look at this race through one lens, there are probably three other ways that doesn't actually make sense. So, like, if you came to me and said, "Well, the problem was that Biden underperformed among Latinos," I would say, "Well, that's true in Florida and Texas, but it's actually not true at all in Arizona and Nevada, where they had targeted precinct walking in those communities, and those communities did actually quite well." As one example. The other example would be, well, what really turned the tide for Biden were suburban voters who were repulsed by Trump. Since centrists gave him the margin of victory, centrism should be the guiding force through then. What we know is that in many of these suburban districts, while many of them couldn't take Trump and went towards Biden, the down ballot races trended sharply Republican in these seats, and many of the seats that Democrats picked up in 2018 in these kinds of districts, suburban based, ended up going back to the Republicans. So that complicates that narrative. If you have a narrative that, well, really the winners were progressives because progressives did this great turnout in places like Detroit and Minneapolis and Philadelphia, and provided the margin of victory. That's all true. But again, if you look down ballot in a place like Nebraska's second district, for example, where Biden actually won that district and won an electoral vote out of it, but Kara Eastman, who was a progressive running on Medicare for All and the Green New Deal, actually underperformed Biden and indeed lost the race to unseat a Republican incumbent. So the narrative is complex. What actually happened in this election is complex. But if I had to boil it down, I would say that there were just enough people who were just, as I said, repulsed by Trump to put the election out of reach for him. There were enough people that just didn't want to sort of take his act anymore. He does have more support in the country than maybe we expected based on the polls. Certainly, this Trumpism is a force that's going to remain with us even if Trump goes away. And what I think we also learned is that the public, by and large, doesn't trust Democrats to govern yet. And that's why, even though Biden won, there was almost no movement at the Senate level, and indeed a retrenchment of losing seats, perhaps substantial amount of seats at the House level. If you look at the ballot measures around the country and where particularly, sort of bread and butter, domestic kind of issues, the side that you would say is the liberal side or the progressive side of that had a very good night. You look at the $15 an hour minimum wage passing with a supermajority in Florida, for example. You look at Colorado putting forward a paid family and medical leave system. You look at Arizona taxing the rich to fund education resources and teacher salaries. You look at Arkansas passing a tax also, this was a sales tax, more regressive tax, but a tax to fund transportation. You look at Nebraska essentially obliterating their payday lending industry, passing a reduction in the maximum interest rate for consumer loans, and doing that with a margin of, I believe, over 80% of the vote. Those issues, divorced from a partisan, Democrat or Republican title on them, those issues trended in the populist direction, the progressive direction. Once you put an actual D or R behind it, that is when people got more skeptical. And they pulled back. I could also mention the 4 states in which marijuana was legalized, including Mississippi, a medical marijuana there. Montana had a legalization vote this time. These are not these are not blue states, right? This is not the liberal America necessarily, where the liberal issues carried the day, but liberal or liberal seeming or democratic, I should say, politicians had a tougher time in those areas. And so, I think the lesson there is that over a successive number of elections over many cycles, Democratic politicians have not proved to the nation that they are willing to take power and govern and create tangible things for the American people, tangible benefits for the American people. And that's the challenge, I think, of a Biden presidency, is to, instead of being afraid of power, to actually wield power. And he can do that even if Mitch McConnell controls the Senate. So we don't know if McConnell is going to control the Senate. There are these 2 special elections in Georgia that could create a 50-50 scenario where Kamala Harris, as vice president, would hold the tiebreaker. So it's still possible for a Democratic trifecta, as it were, but it would be a very narrow one, right? I mean, it would be one where any lawmaker could hold the whip hand, as it were, and say, I want these conditions on anything that we vote on. And that includes Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema and people on the right side of the caucus. So, that's just reality. The reality of the next 2 years is it's very closely contested in Congress, but that doesn't mean that Joe Biden has no options to make progress. Indeed, Donald Trump really only passed one substantial piece of legislation his entire 4 years. That was the Trump tax cuts. But he nevertheless transformed the country, and he did so through his executive authority, using already passed laws to make progress on the things he wanted to make progress on. I wouldn't call it progress, but he would. So, he transformed the immigration system, and he transformed healthcare, and he transformed the environment and energy policy and environmental policy. And Joe Biden has the opportunity to do the same thing. So a year ago, September, the Prospect published something called the Day One Agenda. And this is available right now. You can go to it. It's at prospect.org/day-1-agenda. And what that is it was a compendium of a series of articles about what the next Democratic president can do without legislation. And when we looked into this, we found it was a really robust set of policies. It included canceling student debt, which the education department can do on their own authority. It included seizing drug patents and issuing them to those who will distribute drugs on an affordable basis, thereby reducing costs for millions of Americans. That is something that the federal government has the opportunity to do right now. A host of banking regulations, including a public option for simple banking known as postal banking at the post office, which is not only available as something you can do under executive authority, but there's actually a mandate that the post office has to do this based on the collective bargaining agreement they signed with the American Postal Workers Union. So I could go on, but there are a host of policies, and you can check them all out at prospect.org, that can be done under existing authority. And Joe Biden is going to need to dip into that well and unleash the inherent power of the office and use executive power for good, not abuse it, but actually use it the way it was intended in the Constitution, that the president faithfully executes the laws that are passed by Congress. So there's just a lot of authority there, and it should be used to the extent possible. So that's, I think, the challenge of the next 2 years, and we'll see. We're certainly going to be writing about that in particular and see what a Biden administration is going to do about that. Now, as for what's next for Donald Trump, well, in the immediate term, what we know, what's next is that he's going to, file a bunch of lawsuits. Some of them, most of them, maybe all of them, frivolous, that aren't going to get him to where he needs to be ahead in the vote count. We just learned in the last hour or so that Bill Barr is talking about investigations into voting irregularities. It's unclear whether that's just a bunch of hot air or just sort of letting loose U.S. attorneys or something more substantial. There's certainly going to be a lot of tension over the next 72 days, I believe it is, until Inauguration Day, where the president is just not accepting the reality that he lost the election. And so what can come out of that? Is the president deeply sort of committed to resisting the will of the people? Or is he doing this to sort of cut a deal? Is he doing this in order to come to Biden later and say, okay, I'll give up my various lawsuits as long as you immunize me from prosecution, for example, which is certainly possible. What's he trying to get out of this? What's the end game here? Is this all a setup for a potential restoration election in 2024? And he wants to say that the election was stolen now so he can get his revenge in 4 years. I think all of these things are on the table and on the menu, and it shows that, the jubilation and the relief that was felt in the streets over the weekend it shouldn't be seen as anything with any kind of finality to it. Trumpism is going to be with us. Donald Trump is going to be with us in all likelihood, and the same vigilance that was used and organizing to get him out of office is going to need to be done in order to keep him away from the levers of power in the future. That's just reality. There's no end to this story. I mean, the story of America, there's no closing chapter. At least I hope there isn't. It's an eternal fight, and nothing ever really ends. And I think that's what we're seeing play out now in real time. Another question that was put forward by the moderators was about cabinet appointees with Mitch McConnell in power potentially in the Senate. There are options that a president has to get his or her cabinet installed and in place. We saw this with Donald Trump, where he appointed a bunch of acting nominees and did not seek the advice and consent of the Senate, did not get them confirmed, and yet they continued to operate. We saw this in a host of different cabinet agencies and other federal agencies, and Joe Biden has the ability to do that as well. Any previously Senate confirmed appointee can be put into that position. We saw in 2017, Mick Mulvaney, who was confirmed to be the head of the Office of Management and Budget, became the acting head of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. And that was allowed because under this law called the Federal Vacancies Reform Act, anyone who is already passed, already confirmed, can then slide into a new role. So there are good progressives who are confirmed appointees across the government. You have a guy like Rohit Chopra, who's a commissioner of the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission. If Mitch McConnell is going to say no dice on all of your appointees, they're too radical liberal, you could take Rohit Chopra and say, now you're the Treasury Secretary, dude. That's what we're going to do for you. So that's one option. A second option is that Joe Biden can, as president, adjourn Congress and then recess appoint his entire cabinet. Adjournment power is directly in the Constitution. Same with the recess appointment power. That seems pretty airtight, constitutionally speaking, that he can do this, and they would be eligible up until the end of this Congress. So the end of the 2021-2022 Congress, that is. So for 2 years, you can get those people in place. So, Biden and his transition team, at least the people who had leaked to Axios and other places, have said like, well, Mitch McConnell's in charge. We're going to have to trim our sails. We can't put these fire-breathing liberals in. We're going to have to put in to the cabinet more centrists and people willing, that are able to get votes out of Mitch McConnell's Senate. And that's just not true. I mean, there are options that are available to any president to get the kind of people they want in place in these various agencies. And so what was amusing to me is that, they were, the one article at Axios that was saying, well, Biden is going to have to rely on these centrists now to get confirmed through the Senate. And the roster of people that were listed there were all people that were on the short list of who Biden wanted at these various agencies anyway. So it seemed like they were trying to make excuses to put people in who they already wanted to put in. So we shouldn't fall for that, I don't think. And it should be very clear whatever cabinet members you want. As for the Georgia special election, I actually have a piece today out at the prospect.org on that. I'm a little bit more optimistic about those races than maybe other people. Traditionally, what we see in these runoff elections in Georgia is that the Republicans win, and they usually win fairly handily. There's a significant drop off of the vote, and usually the Republicans stalwarts come out for those runoff elections. But there's reason to believe that might not be true this time. First of all, Joe Biden won Georgia, or appears to have won Georgia for the first time for a Democrat since 1992, and before that, 1976, when it was or actually 1980, because Carter, who was a son of Georgia, won both his elections as presidential elections. So that's number one. The landscape is different. Georgia is a swing state now. I think we can say that very, very specifically. Number two, I am not certain that if Trump is not on the ballot, that there will be a lot of motivation among Trump voters, which are kind of distinct from Republican voters, to come out for Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue. I'm just not convinced that they will. I'm a little bit more convinced that Democrats, particularly people of color in Georgia, will come out for Reverend Warnock, who is the pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church, which was MLK's church, who's deeply been involved in voter organizing and voter registration drives with the New Georgia Project, which he was the board chair of. I think there's a lot of opportunity there. And I think that we could see this election as the test case of something that Democrats need to be doing, which is, making clear what benefits you actually get if you get Democrats in office. So there's, this talk about a stimulus bill. It didn't come through before the election. You could see every member of the Senate Democratic caucus sign on to a bill and say, this is the thing that we're passing if we get 50 votes in the United States Senate. And you can do that under budget reconciliation. So the filibuster isn't an issue because it's a spending bill. You could do it with just a 50 vote bare majority. And they could just write it on a sheet of paper and say, this is what you get if you vote for Reverend Warnock and Jon Ossoff as a team to come in from the state of Georgia. And we can see if that works, right? We can test that hypothesis that you run on something that's tangible and people reward you. We have an opportunity to see if that works, if they take that path. So those are some of my thoughts on the election. I know you guys wanted to touch on the pandemic. The first question that was put to me by the moderators was, will this pandemic ever end? We got actually some good news on that front today. Pfizer, the pharmaceutical firm who has been doing a phase 3 trial for its vaccine, the vaccine to the coronavirus, released some preliminary but very promising results, saying that early results show the vaccine to be 90% effective. The experts that I have talked to about vaccines in general said if the coronavirus vaccine, we would be happy if it was 70% effective. The FDA might approve it if it's 50% effective, as long as it's safe. So to hear 90% effectiveness is a really good sign. I mean, it's a real win for science if they manage to create something that is that effective. We don't know, this is preliminary information. Once again, we don't know all the subgroups. Is it effective in all groups, the elderly, people of color, whoever? And, just even if they're on track to get approval from the FDA by the end of this month or by the end of the year, there's still the matter of getting this thing out to the public. And really, if you think about this, you're talking about the shipment of not 300 million doses to cover every man, woman, and child, but actually 600 million, because there are 2 doses that need to be taken for this particular vaccine to be effective. Getting those out to every man, woman, and child in the country, and indeed to getting them out eventually to everyone in the world, is the largest logistical project known to mankind. I mean, you can't think of anything else that is bigger than getting this vaccine distributed. As I said, it takes 2 doses, so you got to make sure somebody who gets the first one comes back for the second one. It has to be apparently kept at extremely low temperatures, like negative 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So you have to have the storage and facilities to actually do that. It has a small shelf life, a short shelf life. So once you distribute it, you have to make sure that it's actually used. It's not all going to be ready at once. So you're going to have to ration it to essential workers, healthcare workers, residents of nursing homes, vulnerable populations are going to have to get it first. You have to make those decisions. You have to make sure that it goes to access points where they can actually get them. And you have to do this all while we're in the middle of a raging pandemic. There is no bigger logistical process that has ever been attempted. And I, for one, even though the bureaucracy is really going to be driving the process, but I, for one, would be happy for a Joe Biden to take the reins of that rather than a Donald Trump, who just doesn't display, let's say, the seriousness on a daily basis that you might need in this kind of situation. So, this is a really serious period right now. It's a very dangerous period. It's, I guess Joe Biden called it a dark winter. It is. We're going to see cases just skyrocket over the next couple weeks. The vaccine is very promising, but we're probably realistically something like 6 months away from this being available to everyone in the country. And, to me, though, hearing this about the promising potential of this vaccine should make people more cautious, not less cautious. It should tell people that, this has been a really tough time, but if we just get a few more months through this, there is a light at the end of the tunnel here, and we have the ability to not have to get the entire country sick. We can hold on and protect our health and wear masks and practice social distancing and be cautious and wash our hands, and we can be all right. And there is a scientific ability to reverse this. So that should be a reason to keep up the work that everybody has been doing, rather than slip back because, hey, we're going to get a vaccine soon anyway. So that's kind of my focus on that. As far as will there be because there are 2 sides of this virus, right? There's the public health catastrophe, and there's also the economic catastrophe. As I mentioned, we didn't get a stimulus before the election. McConnell has talked about wanting a stimulus now, probably because he doesn't want one in the hands of Joe Biden, and he doesn't want it in the hands of potentially not him if if Georgia comes through. So he's probably going to try to negotiate with Nancy Pelosi and get something done in the lame duck session. I don't think it'll be enough. I don't think it'll be nearly as robust as it's needed. It probably won't do enough for state and local governments who are really, really struggling right now. And it's clear to me that whether there's an agreement or not, that in the next Congress and with the next president, something is going to need to be done. And the question is, will there be the ability to do that and the willingness to do that? So these are all big questions that are available to us in the next couple of months. And now I want to take your questions.
Great, thank you, David. So if people have questions, maybe we can do it like this. Just type me into the chat and I'll just take questions that way in order. Okay, the first question is from Dan Schuler.
Hey, David, I wanted to ask, well, I have a bunch of questions. I guess I'll go with the Prop 22 question. I don't know how familiar you are with Prop 22 in California, which passed, which was funded, well, the Vote Yes campaign on Prop 22 is funded by Uber and Lyft, and basically it exempts Uber and Lyft from a law that California passed recently that would have forced them to treat their drivers as employees. I wonder if you could give us your take on that and where you see that going from there, because obviously there's other states that may be looking to just do the same thing, and also like the interplay between California's why can't I never think of the word, voter initiatives, and why like the voters would overrule the laws passed by the representatives.
Yeah.
In this
well, I should have mentioned that I'm speaking to you from Los Angeles, California. So I definitely have a particular interest and insight into Prop 22. This was the largest, the most money ever spent by one side of a ballot measure in US history. It was over $200 million that Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash put forward to get this done. Sadly, we have a failed experiment with direct democracy here in California, where the side that has the most money almost always wins. The previous largest, most money spent on a ballot measure in U.S. history was by the dialysis industry 2 years ago, and prior to that, it was by the pharmaceutical industry in 2016. In a measure that Bernie Sanders came out here and actually stumped for and supported. His side lost because the pharmaceutical industry put in, I think, $100 million into that race. So corporate interests have gotten involved in a major way in California at the ballot. And this one is probably, I would say, the most egregious example of that. You have Uber, Lyft, and DoorDash literally buying labor law. They not only did what you refer to, this change to labor law that targets, that says that gig drivers are employees and not independent contractors. Not only did that pass in the legislature, it was the subject of a state Supreme Court ruling that said that yes, Uber and Lyft drivers are employees and not independent contractors. So not only are Uber and Lyft overturning the legislative branch, but they're overturning the judicial branch by doing this through our fourth branch of democracy here in California, which is the initiative branch, and spending $200 million in really insidious ways. I don't know if you heard about this, but drivers in California, when they logged on to start driving for Uber or Lyft during this time, they got a screen that came up that said, "Do you support Prop 22?" And until they pressed yes, they could not start driving. It's absolutely outrageous. They tried to cite this as a racial justice measure by basically paying off the head of the NAACP in California to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was a terrible, terrible circumstance that ended up getting them this win. And Uber and Lyft are already out saying that they're going to export this to other states. So you can expect this to be on the ballot in your state too. I would not at all be surprised. I don't know about Virginia law and initiatives necessarily, but in general, what I'm saying is that the states that have the ability to do this, you're going to see Uber come in and try to pass the exact same thing they did in California. And why wouldn't they think it would work? I mean, this is supposedly this unbelievably blue state, and they were able to rather easily win this at the ballot box. And they have a very deep pockets, and they have the ability to do this in all kinds of other states, and it probably wouldn't be quite as costly as the 200 million that it took here, where we have 39 million people, than it would in a smaller state. So I'm pretty aggrieved by the result there of Prop 22, and I think it portends very badly for the rest of the country.
Can I ask a follow-up question actually before we move on to the next question we got? So I remember back during the primaries when the initial legislation to change the way that they were being classified, the drivers that is, was being considered. I think Los Angeles Times had posted an article that actually discussed Kamala Harris' relationship to the issue, because I mean, from what I understand, her sister and her brother-in-law are both executives at Uber.
Just her brother-in-law. So Tony West, who was the number 3 person at the Justice Department under Obama, actually, is married to Maya Harris. Maya Harris is Kamala's sister. Maya Harris was also Hillary Clinton's policy director in 2016. And Tony West then left the Justice Department and became the chief legal officer at Uber. Yes. So you have someone who is the brother-in-law of the incoming vice president-elect, who works for Uber and who was someone who spearheaded this strategy at the ballot box. So that's certainly concerning. I mean, if you think about the Obama administration's relationship to Silicon Valley and tech, and wondering if the Biden administration is going to have that same kind of relationship. I mean, I think sort of as a reflexive matter, Biden doesn't have that same relationship. Like, he doesn't regard Silicon Valley guys as really just these wonderful people that can help us technocratically solve problems in the world. He sees them more as punks, I think. But there are these linkages, right? There are these linkages, and you've identified one of them.
Okay, so we've got a question in the chat from Aliyah. Thank you, David, for the post-election debrief. Please, can you recommend the top 3 next steps that progressives should begin focusing on to continue the people's movement?
That's a great question. Sadly, the election cycles never stop, right? So there are certainly going to be more elections to participate in and get involved in. One of them right there in your home state of Virginia, right? In the fall, and they're going to be a lot of progressive legislative candidates right on the ballot, and who is going to replace the governor. And so there's, right in your backyard, there's something to do, which is electoral politics. We put out the day one agenda, which I alluded to before, and we're going to continue tracking this stuff because, we felt it was important to inform people that legislative gridlock is not the end of the game. Right? That there are other opportunities to make tangible progress for people outside of passing new laws. And a Biden administration needs to be held to that. Like, once we have all of the information that what a Biden administration can do on student debt, what he can do on drug prices, what he can do on climate, what he can do on banking regulation, what he can do on monopolies, Once you have that information, then it's time to make him do it, as FDR famously said, "Make me do it," to an activist who said that they wanted FDR to enact some policy or other. So I think organizing around that, around the day one agenda, around executive action, I think is very important. Making your voices heard on that to your legislators and to in public and to the White House more generally. So that's two. I think there's just going to need to be more organizing and more vigilance in the circumstance regarding regarding Trumpism in this country. I mean, there's still a pull of right-wing populism that exists in many sectors of the country. And the question is, what is it going to take to lower the temperature, which is now at a fevered pitch? Now it's talking about a stolen election. It's talking about maybe the QAnon kind of controversy or all of this stuff. It's at a really fevered place, and Trump going away is not going to make it go away. So the question is, what do you do about that? And I've heard about the work that groups like People's Action are doing around deep canvassing, like having deep, meaningful conversations with people to try to reach common ground and understand where they're coming from, and finding ways to focus on the real challenges that are common that we all face, whether we're in a rural area or an urban area or whatever. I think that work is going to be central, I think, to the work of the progressive movement over the next decade. And it's long work. It sometimes doesn't seem like fruitful work. It's going to take a lot of time and effort, and there are going to be moments when it seems futile, but I think it's the only way to get us to a place that we can have a society that not only isn't having two different conversations, but just is operating on two different planes of reality.
Great, thank you, David. So if there's no more questions, Dan Schuller, did you want to ask a follow-up?
This is not a follow-up. This is a completely different question. I wanted to ask about, talking about Joe Biden and executive power or executive authority. I think a lot of us here were very disappointed in like what happened when Obama was in office in 2008 with the all the scandals going on with the economic collapse at the time, and the Justice Department having people in their sights and then not pulling the trigger. And I'm now again worried that Biden will have Trump administration. And we know that the Trump administration has probably done all kinds of insane, corrupt, and illegal things. Do you think that Biden will actually, and the Justice Department will actually go after those folks? And what do you think would be the consequences if they did or if they did not?
Well, this is a key question, and I actually wrote a whole book about this. My first book, Chain of Title, was about the failure to prosecute for the financial crisis and the flood of foreclosures that happened after it, and the fraud that was suffused throughout that process at every level. And I really believe that lack of accountability, that failure on the part of law enforcement, on the part of the Obama administration, helped bring about Trump. And it allowed a demagogue to say that the country isn't working for you. There are two Americas. There's a justice system for one set of people and a different one for the other. Who you are matters more than what you did. And we're in danger of seeing that again. Lack of accountability, I think, has been a hallmark of the last 20 years in America. It's whether you're talking about the financial crisis, whether you're talking about, I don't know, the any kind of the Me Too movement, the Trump administration, the failure of accountability there, you name it. And we have not seen the rich and powerful held accountable when they do wrong. Whereas, a kid holding a dime bag can get locked up for 10 years. So that is a really central question. And, part of that is going to be determined by the personnel that Biden puts into the Justice Department and what they're willing to do and what they're willing to, what they're willing to sustain in terms of if you try to do this, there's going to be an absolute outrage on the part of a large section of the country, and managing that and figuring that out. But there's going to be a reckoning one way or the other, right? I mean, there's going to be, if you don't release the reports and do the work locking up right-wing terrorists that are taking place, plotting actions. You had one trying to kidnap the governor of Michigan, for example. If you don't start working on that, there's the potential for more really tragic actions. But if you do it, you're going to get caterwauling on the right that they're being unfairly targeted. So the question is, where do you come down on the balance between those two? It's the same thing with the president and his allies and his family. Now, the federal Justice Department might end up punting, but that doesn't mean the states will. And Tish James, who's the Attorney General of New York, has vowed to continue no matter what with her investigations of the Trump Organization and Donald Trump himself. So I think it might be an easier lift at the state level. And of course, even if Trump manages to figure out how to pardon himself, which, we've never had that situation before from a president. But one thing that I floated in an article earlier this year was that, on Inauguration Day, like at 10 a.m., Trump could resign. Mike Pence becomes president, and he pardons Trump. So there you go. And that would certainly be 100% constitutional. There's no doubt about it. But even that would not cover state crimes, right? So you would still have the opportunity for the attorney generals of New York or any other state to prosecute things that they saw that were illegal. So there are opportunities there, but we'll just have to see.
So Andrew, did you want to ask a question?
Andrew
Parr?
We can't hear you. Andrew Parr, yes.
You're on mute. Do you need to take him off mute?
I'm clicking on mute, but I don't think I can.
Oh, I think
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we hear you now.
Hello?
Yeah. Hi.
Sorry about that. Thanks, guys. I just want to say, David, I really appreciate all your comments. Thank you for joining us tonight. And I particularly agree with the comment about accountability for the Bush administration and all their crimes. That's, to me, the heart of getting us where we are. But the question I had for you, you mentioned using the executive orders as Biden's potential path to move forward on a lot of things. And I agree with you that that is a path, and it was certainly used by Trump effectively. But isn't that getting us away from democracy and more towards dictatorship or a monarchy if the executive can just start doing this kind of stuff? And isn't this a really bad thing to promote and to keep going rather than to kind of cut it off, even though we need it at this point, or we may need it?
I don't think so. And I'll explain why. If you look at Article 2 of the Constitution and what the duties in office of our president, you get a few things like they're the commander in chief of the armed forces. They have the ability to negotiate treaties, and they can fill vacancies within the executive branch, things like that. But really their main function, the main function of a president is to take care that the laws are faithfully executed. In other words, Congress passes the laws and the president implements the laws. And all I'm asking for is for a president to implement the laws. And you know, there are just 230 years worth of these laws, and they happen to be pretty powerful. Areas in which Congress has delegated authority through the legislative process, which is fully constitutional, to the president to you know, do various things. Every one of the things that I talked about has an antecedent in the law. I can name you the legislation that was passed. So if you want to cancel student debt, the reason that the Education Department can do that is an authority they were given under the Higher Education Act to have discretionary authority on publicly held debt to, it's called compromise and settlement authority. They can settle that debt. And, you know, over the last 10 years, another law that this was actually part of Obamacare that that Congress passed was to say that they eliminated the bank middlemen who were in the student loan process and said that loans will be directly issued by the federal government and by the Education Department. So it is 100% constitutional. It is just taking care that that law is faithfully executed to use compromise and settlement authority, in this case, to relieve this terrible burden of student debt that is affecting our economy. It's creating situations where young people cannot buy durable goods, cannot buy houses, cannot buy cars, because they're so weighed down with this debt. And so that to me is just the job description of a president, to take a law that was passed legally by Congress and apply it and implement it. And every single one of the things in the Day One agenda has a similar story to it. So I don't think it's dictatorial in any way to follow the Constitution and have a president just implement laws that Congress passed. I think some of Trump's executive orders were of extremely dubious legality, and those have been, you know, battled out in the courts. The Supreme Court saw fit to bless the most egregious one, I thought, was when he took money that was intended for military construction and used it to fund his border wall, saying that the border was a national security threat and an emergency, and that he could use that money for that purpose. The Supreme Court decided that was okay. I don't agree with that. But if you think that that's okay, Supreme Court, isn't the biggest national emergency facing us climate change? And shouldn't money then be redistributed from the defense budget to then build wind turbines all over the country and to build solar panels all over the country? That's just using the same logic. And you know, I think that there are ways to use the executive action that is completely legal under the Constitution, and that is just basically follows statutory law that was passed by Congress and that has not been revoked or rescinded in any way. And if Congress doesn't like it, they can rescind that law, and then you know, the executive won't implement it anymore. So the Congress still has that authority. But as long as that law is on the books, we ought to use it, especially if we can use it to make benefits for the American people.
Right, but benefits, in this case, it'll benefit the people because that's where the thinking is. But if Trump was able to do that and get away with it, and the court supported him, I mean, that's what I'm concerned about. Is it's up to the particular president and if he's doing things for us, hey, that's good. But if it's Trump and he's doing bad things, then it's tyranny, and I mean, that's the slope. I mean,
I understand what you're
why
saying.
didn't Obama use this stuff? I mean, Obama just got stymied for 8 years.
That's a very good question. Why didn't Obama use this stuff? And in fact, it took 6 years for Obama to say the words, "I have a pen and a phone." He was being asked for 6 years to implement the DACA program that protected Dreamers from being deported. And he said he couldn't do it, didn't have the authority, not possible. And then 6 years later, he decided that he could go ahead and do it. And of course, the Trump administration tried to get rid of the DACA program, and were told that they didn't do it the right way. And so the court actually upheld the DACA program. So it's not a one-way situation. What I would say is that Congress has authority, by the way, if the courts go out of control and bless things that they find abhorrent or unconstitutional or just illegal or wrong. Congress has the ability to check them. There are so many Supreme Court rulings that are based on just statutory interpretation. In other words, this is what the law says, and I'm going to twist that around as a Supreme Court justice and use that to throw out this particular law. And all Congress has to do is say, all right, well, we'll rewrite that statute and restore the law that we thought was important to pass forward. Congress did this. The very first piece of legislation that Barack Obama passed was the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act. And that was based on a Supreme Court ruling with Lilly Ledbetter, who was suffering from pay discrimination for 30 years. But she didn't know about it until the end, because you don't know that what all your coworkers make necessarily until after the fact. And she sued, but they said, well, the statute of limitations is up. And in her dissent, Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, Congress, all you have to do is change the statute to word it differently so that you have retroactive ability. And that's all the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act is. So, you know, we are not powerless, as it were, to see the Supreme Court become this super legislator and decide what's legal and what's not. Congress has the authority to counteract that. And if they don't, and it's not being done in you know, the service to the people, then Congress in the next election can say, you know, vote me into office, and this is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to counteract that. And so it's, you know, our system of government is extremely complex in terms of what authorities are delegated and what people can do and what they can't do. But, you know, there's always a check. Whether you think there's creeping dictatorial circumstances coming in or not, there's always a possibility and a check on that power. And there's always an election that can remedy it as well. And we literally just saw that. I mean, you know, the public, by and large, majority of the public didn't like Donald Trump's style of governing, and they threw him out. And you know, the unconstitutional things, or potentially unconstitutional or dictatorial things that he was engaged in terms of the border wall and taking money for it, in terms of immigration, what have you, they're likely to end. And so you know, you could say that in that narrow sense that the system worked, that the electoral system provided the check that it needed to on someone. You know, autocrats don't get beat at the ballot box, right? Like, that doesn't happen. So you know, you can offer a little bit of hope in this system that you know, there was an election. It was apparently free and fair, and it produced a result that was you know, one that took someone who maybe was a self-styled autocrat and defeated him.
Thank you very much. Great comments.
Thank
Great
you.
talk.
Great, thank you, David. If you haven't grown tired of us, actually, I'd like to maybe seg a little bit to talk a little bit about your book, because I think actually one thing that I was really kind of surprised about reading it. Well, I don't know why I was surprised, but I guess it struck me, was that you know, you spend a good portion of your book describing all kinds of the damage, frankly, that is being done by the fact that, you know, almost every industrial sector of the United States, you know, is basically facing extreme concentration of economic power. And yet, what you point out in the book kind of is that, you know, we have the laws and the record are sufficient to stop all of it, but it's just not being properly enforced. So I guess maybe as a kind of seg, maybe you could just talk to us about, what's going on with the economy, in terms of monopoly control, and why should we care? How is it affecting, our politics? And I'll let you just kind of go from there.
Yeah, you got it. So the book is Monopolized: Life in the Age of Corporate Power. There's just to bring in the day one agenda thing. There's certainly a day one agenda for anti-monopoly and antitrust. Yeah, we'll just sort of go back to the beginning here. I mean, the first anti-monopoly law that was put on the books was put all the way back in 1890. It's the Sherman Antitrust Act, and it's still the act that governs a lot of this conduct when you're talking about merger policy and anti-monopoly harms. The Google case that was just the lawsuit that the Justice Department just put down was under the Sherman Act of 1890, even though Google certainly wasn't around at that time. So that's sort of the main law, and then there are others like the Clayton Antitrust Act and the FTC Act and Seller-Kefauver and Robinson-Patman and all sorts of antitrust and anti-monopoly laws that provide a regime that is intended to allow for vibrant competition within the economy. And this kind of held for several decades, fits and starts, but certainly through the New Deal era on through the 1970s, this was the standard by which the economy was structured. And sometime in the 1970s, the school, sometimes known as the Chicago School, because it's a lot of economists and thinkers at the University of Chicago, but also backed up by big business, and a guy at Yale University by the name of Robert Bork, who you might know as a failed Supreme Court justice, but who had much more power in this arena, came up with sort of a framework to essentially reinterpret the Sherman Act and a lot of anti-monopoly laws without actually changing the text of those laws. And what essentially Bork said in a very important book called The Antitrust Paradox in 1978 was that a merger should go through if it creates a more efficient company, that is the merged entity is more efficient, and efficient really means lower prices for consumers. And the corollary to that is he said that a bigger company is always more efficient. So this is complete tautology. This is like the most circular logic you can imagine. There's no way to deny a merger under the framework that Robert Bork laid out. And yet it was adopted. It was adopted by the Reagan administration in their Justice Department in 1982, the antitrust guidelines, merger guidelines. It was adopted by many judges who started making more and more rulings that were on Borkian principles, Chicago school principles. And for 40 years, the antitrust enforcement agencies have essentially been taken off the field. And that had a very predictable consequence. And the consequence was to concentrate power and markets in every sector of the economy. And so the book goes into several examples of those, whether it's journalism I talk about in one chapter, and Google and Facebook controlling all of the advertising and also all of the eyeballs, and how journalism has grown up sort of at the whim of Google and Facebook, and that's how it operates right now. For example, number one, agriculture is another chapter, and how inputs monopolies like seeds and hog butchers and all kinds of meat and dairy companies have become terribly concentrated. Pharmaceuticals, as we sort of alluded to before, that's a government granted monopoly. You're given a patent for 20 years and you can exclusively sell that product. And so not surprisingly, the recipients of that patent try to extend those monopoly rights by various systems like patent evergreening, where you hold a patent on another part of the drug. You just make a different concoction of it that doesn't change the efficacy of it. Sometimes it's the size of the capsule. So now you've patented a slightly larger capsule and you get that monopoly patent for another series of time. There's things like pay for delay deals where you literally, as a drug company, pay a generic rival to not enter the market. You like give them money so that they'll stay out and you keep your monopoly. But you know, those are a few examples, but it's really everywhere. It's hospitals, it's retail, it's I talk in this book about a monopoly in baby food and baby formula, and I talk about a monopoly in coffin manufacturing and funeral homes. So it's literally cradle to the grave stuff. This is what this looks like. And so, you know, the question is then, you know, what do we do about that? First of all, what has it done? What has it meant? It's definitely created lower wages. There's, you know, if you have fewer things to buy, usually the prices go up. And if you are, a worker and you have fewer places that bid for your services, your wages go down. And that's what we're seeing effectively in the economy. We're seeing less innovation. We're seeing fewer startups, cut in about half since the 1980s. We're seeing more abuses of market power that have impacts on partners, on third parties. I talk about Amazon a lot in the book and Amazon's third-party sellers. And I'll just give you an example of just how this power manifests itself in ways you probably wouldn't have thought about. There are about 2.5 million third-party sellers on Amazon. These are people who sell their own products on the Amazon marketplace. About a third of those, about 800,000, use that as their primary occupation. Like that's their job, is to sell things on Amazon. And, there are conventions because there are ways to get ahead, tips and tricks on how to become a great seller on Amazon. And like human nature being what it is, those conventions have men and women at it, and sometimes they become couples. There was this one circumstance that I heard about where this couple, they met at an Amazon convention, and they decided to move in together after they'd been dating for a while. Turned out they lived in the same area. And as soon as they moved in together, their Amazon accounts were suspended. And they scrambled to try to figure out why. If your account's suspended, you can't sell anything. You can't get your inventory back if it's with Amazon. It's a really terrible circumstance. So they're scrambling and trying to figure out what did we do wrong? What happened here? Why are our accounts suspended? And finally, after a while, you can't get anyone on a phone, but they did get an email. And what they discovered is that because their IP address was the same for both of the accounts, Amazon thought like some shenanigans were going on where someone had a multiple set of accounts. And so this couple had to get permission from Amazon to live together. Like that's what the upshot of that really was. And, that level of power and control is really, really kind of frightening at some level as to what it means for the rest of us who aren't part of large companies. And of course, as you mentioned, economic power often converts into political power. And certainly that's no different with monopolists who are able to buy politicians and write laws to their content and things like that. So that's what I go over in the book. I kind of take one chapter and look at a sector of the economy in each chapter and follow someone specifically in each chapter who is dealing with living through monopoly. One thing I wanted to do in the book was really explain what it's like to live under monopoly. Like how are people dealing with it? How are people affected by it in ways that you might not think about? And so that's what the book is about. And then the final chapter, I try to say that we have these laws on the books and all we have to do is use them. And how do we do that? We build a movement. We build an anti-monopoly movement that's, is resilient and willing to challenge concentrated power. Now, somebody asked me in the chat, I see how the anti-monopolists did in this election. I think that during the campaign, in the aftermath of the primaries, Joe Biden took a lot of ideas from the anti-monopoly movement. They were in the platform. They were in the Sanders-Biden task force document. There was a lot of anti-monopoly language and things like that. There are advisors who are anti-monopolists. And so, we'll see what happens, but I think Biden, there is a foothold there on what Biden would do as far as monopoly power. It's really up to him to put together a strong set of personnel at the Justice Department and at the Federal Trade Commission that are willing to be aggressive and use the tools that they have at their disposal. And, I think the important thing is that the House Antitrust Subcommittee, which is headed by a guy named David Cicilline, who's in Rhode Island, put together a document that was based on a year-long study they did, particularly of tech markets, of Amazon, Apple, Facebook, and Google. And what they really laid out, I feel like it was just sort of a case study for the monopoly elements within our entire economy. Tech was a good thing to use there. But they really laid out a blueprint. And the blueprint is for how you tackle monopoly power, because their recommendations, some of them were very tech focused, but most of them were kind of the things that you would use to break up large concentrations of power, to get a handle on monopolies, and to make sure that enforcement is robust and is taking these actions. And so we have this blueprint. We have this document that says you have to do these 10 things in order to, and most of them are already at the disposal of a president, because they don't necessarily require new laws. A few of the things in that document do, but not all of them. I feel like there's a roadmap here, and now it's about holding Biden accountable to that roadmap.
Thanks. Thank you, David. I was gonna just as come up somewhat personal note, at least for our group. I mean, I guess it's not even just at the federal level that we can potentially take on these monopolies. And right now, like members of our group have been working on a campaign just to establish a municipal broadband authority, because we have to basically have there's a duopoly here that doesn't even intersect in all places. And we're like, as you wrote in the book on your chapter on the kind of telecom monopolies, why are students at a Taco Bell like using their Wi-Fi to do internet? And we've seen that kind of writ large in the pandemic situation, where the schools have been closed, where lockdown has sent the haves into their home offices, and then it's just been a complete nightmare in terms of accessing information and being able to be still part of the economy. And from our point of view, and our county board really had no choice at the beginning but to pay out a princely sum, I think about $500,000 to Comcast for its Internet Essentials program, just to try to provide some kind of access to the internet for the poor school students here. So and from our point of view, I mean and they've done a little bit. I mean, we actually have an existing dark fiber system here that they could use, but we're trying to convince our county board to create the legal authority, which they can do under the law, under Virginia state law, to kind of make this thing work. But I mean, it's just this in a lot of states, I know that it's not necessarily possible. It's basically impossible to do any kind of public or community broadband. But I mean, I guess the point that I just wanted to make was that while we should certainly be holding federal officials' feet to the fire on this. I mean, this is not, as you highlight in so many cases in the book, this is not. I mean, this is not frivolous. I mean, like this is, like physical and moral and spiritual and cultural and social damage to so many people in so many ways.
Great. It's a
but
great point,
at the local level, at least there may be some levers, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great point, and I should have brought it up. There, not only do all state attorneys general have the ability to block mergers and sue for anti-monopolistic conduct, or for anti-competitive conduct, I should say, for monopoly, for that monopolies are doing under the Sherman Act. There's a host of state and local laws, and yes, there's an entire chapter in my book on Muni broadband, and I focus on the city of Chattanooga, which has the fastest internet speeds in the world. There are 10 gig internet speeds in Chattanooga because they do fiber to the home through their electric company, which is publicly owned. And they have wired the entire city of Chattanooga. They have about half penetration, about half the city. And it's had so many salutary effects. It's created a community of entrepreneurs. 3D printing is huge in Chattanooga. It's created these incubators. It's been great for telemedicine. It's been great for education. It's been great for small business opportunity. And it's been just really incredible. And then, cities that are adjacent to Chattanooga saw this and said, hey, we want that. We want faster broadband speeds, but they can't get them because the state of Tennessee, being lobbied by AT&T and Comcast, passed a law that said you cannot serve, if you're an electric utility, you cannot serve fiber optic broadband to cities outside your service area. And so even though they have the ability and the means and the willingness to do it, they can't. And so if you get 3 minutes outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee, you have dial-up. You don't have 10 gig internet, you have dial-up. And as you said, kids go to Starbucks parking lots to try to catch Wi-Fi to do their homework, which is ridiculous. And I talked to people in rural Tennessee who are just desperate for good, decent broadband for a host of reasons. And even more so in the pandemic, as you say, when you have remote learning coming up, and just can't get it because the dominant monopolies, the telecom monopolies, don't want to give it to them because there's just no money in building it out, because there's just not enough market there. But they also don't want anyone else to do it because they don't want anyone to know that they can have nice things. So it's a really interesting story, and even in the face of this, hundreds of communities across America have municipal broadband. And they fought for it really, really hard, the way that you're fighting for it now. And they've been successful. I mentioned one case in the book in Fort Collins, Colorado, where they put on the ballot whether to establish a municipal broadband system. And Comcast came in with like $1 million or some ridiculous sum of money for a small city like Fort Collins. And the backers of Muni Broadband had like $10,000 for the campaign. And they still won. And they won resoundingly because the public is with this idea of affordable broadband for everybody, and stopping telecom monopolies, who are some of the most hated companies on earth. So this is possible. And it's possible at the local level. And that's not the only thing that's possible at the local level, right? I mean, you can do public banking at the state level. You can do anti-chain store laws. Like there's an anti-dollar store law in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that says you have to have fresh options within the city limits. The state of North Dakota has a law that says all pharmacists must be local. So they don't have pharmacy chains. They don't have CVS and Rite Aid being dominant, and Walgreens. There are options at the state and local level to start small and build an anti-monopoly movement. And if it starts there, it can go all the way up.
Great, thank you so much. I don't know if anyone, or if we, have we exhausted the questions on this? I don't see anything in the chat here. Going once.
Well, I'm a little exhausted.
Yeah, I know. Thank you so much. I mean, it's been a marathon for you. I know we kind of double booked you on topics here, but
Well, I really, really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much. It's great to see groups who are active. You know, the fear was after the election that these groups would fade away, right? That everyone would go to brunch again, and that all problems would be solved. And what you guys know, and what you should know is that that's not true. That democracy always requires eternal vigilance, and it's great to see organizations like yours that are taking that head on and living up to that. And so good luck and stay in the fight, and prospect.org. We'll see you there. We'll be chronicling it.
Thank you so much, David, and definitely everyone subscribe to his Unsanitized, because it is just absolutely amazing. So
All right. Thanks a lot.
thanks. Take care.
Thanks.
All right. So I did want to, I know people are probably kind of tired at this point. Zoom calls are pretty exhausting. I kind of just wanted to let you guys know that we are doing stuff, and kind of locally, basically. And we haven't always been necessarily good at publicizing it to members in the list, just because I guess we're busy, trying to do our jobs, our day jobs, and then do this kind of stuff in the evening. But I wanted to kind of highlight two things. One, as I kind of alluded to already, is on the broadband front. I'll just talk very briefly about it. We have been trying to convince the county board, as I mentioned, to look into forming what's called a wireless service authority, which is basically a legal entity that would allow them to do exactly what David has mentioned there, which is to build out a fiber to the home network to anybody who wants it, frankly, over the coming years, in order to basically, so we'll never be in this situation ever again, of just being completely dependent on these monopolist telecom companies that are just they're either not serving everyone or they're charging too much for service. And looking around other cities, as he's mentioned, Chattanooga and a number of other places, like they've made broadband ridiculously cheap, that blazing speeds, which is not what we're getting here. So it's just, to us, it's like,
how cheap.
Oh, well, okay. So the model that we've been looking at is kind of a public-private model, for lack of a better term, where basically the county, what we're proposing is the county build out the fiber network, put the pipe to your house if you want it, and then allows, uses software to create a virtual network, and then private companies can compete over it to provide service. And so there's a town that did this called Ammon. It's in Idaho, and they have now reached gigabit symmetrical for $10 a month. $10 a month. Now,
that's more than I pay right now. I'm sorry, that is less than I pay right now.
I was gonna say,
like
share your secrets,
$90
Dan.
a month.
Yeah. Now there are some caveats to that, depending on whether you paid outright to have the pipe laid, or whether you went with a financing plan. You may pay a couple extra bucks, but I mean, at the most, you'd be paying $50, and there's all kinds of ways to subsidize the people right now who can't afford anything more than $1 basically. So this is highly possible. Other cities like Arlington size are looking at doing feasibility studies. So we have been meeting with the board members, and we actually spoke. I wrote up a blog post about our action, but we went and spoke at the county board a few weekends ago. I was at their recess meeting because they were actually planning to basically put money forward for a feasibility study to see whether they can, how much it would cost for them to connect to affordable housing complexes right now using the dark fiber system. And it was going to go into a number of complexities, like what kind of systems, what kind of technology would be best to use to do it, and how much each of those options would cost. So we went and just basically asked them to, in addition to that, to consider the forming the authority, because the authority would allow them to do that directly. I mean, right now they're looking at whether they can have a third party, private nonprofit or something like that do it. And, that's not necessarily bad, but we don't think it's the optimal option. So we've asked them to take a look at the authority, and we had to think about 10 people speak, one of which was Dan, one of which is me, and a bunch of other people that we're working
Jeff
with.
was
Some
there.
of them are, some of them are ex-teachers who are working with Hispanic, or not Hispanic, but English language learners right now, and they're telling the county board that these families just have a terrible time right now trying to connect, and they're most likely, given the difficulties they're having with the schools in terms of connecting there, like they could end up just kind of dropping out. So we made those concerns kind of clear to the board, and as kind of a miracle, they actually began discussing the possibility of forming a broadband authority in the ensuing discussion with the staff. And so we've traded some emails with them since then, and we've had some conversations privately with them. And they are now seriously looking into it. So, but we need, if you're interested in this issue, you certainly get in touch with us, because we need people. This is going to have to be a campaign, and we need to bring, we're going to have to bring a lot of additional kind of pressure and advocacy to the board on it, because I think they're interested in it, but they're kind of broadband curious, if you will, but they're not quite there yet. And I think we just need to keep pushing that. So that's one thing we've been doing, and I kind of want to turn it over to Dan to kind of talk about some of the work we did in terms of advocating on housing. There was recently a proposed change to the Columbia Pike Form-Based Code that got a lot of activist groups kind of agitated, and so there was a series. We intervened in a series of of county meetings to try to along with other groups to try to stymie this. So anyway, but I'll let Dan kind of talk about it since I'm tired of talking.
Okay, I'll try to summarize the incredibly weird and complicated form-based code change they wanted to do. So basically, if you're not familiar, Columbia Pike has a bunch of apartment buildings, a bunch of housing on it that is what we call market rate affordable. So it's not a special program. Anybody can go and rent an apartment there. And it's still expensive, but for Arlington, it's affordable. And it's one of the few places in Arlington that someone with a lower income can live in. It's very immigrant heavy, very minority heavy. And there was a proposed change to the zoning ordinance that governs how things can be built along Columbia Pike that would have made it easier for developers to redevelop the buildings along there into condos, and it would have made it easier to meet the affordable housing requirements. So if you're building a new tall building on Columbia Pike, part of the deal is you have to make so many units of that building quote affordable, which is basically means it's subsidized for people with lower incomes. They wanted to change, like right now, the current form-based code says that these affordable units have to be affordable to someone making 60% of the median income in Arlington. They wanted to change it to range between 80 and 100% of area median income. So if you have to imagine that Columbia Pike, the median income along Columbia Pike is much lower than Arlington at large. So that's one thing that's already kind of messed up. And then to have a unit that's 100% median income, it was something like I don't remember what the exact number was, like $90,000 to $100,000 a year. We'd be subsidizing a unit for someone that was making that amount of income. It's pretty nuts. And in the process, you lose all of that existing, all those apartment buildings that are there now would go away essentially. So there's a huge risk of, this is like the definition of gentrification basically. So there's a huge risk of all those people in that low income housing being displaced. And this caught the eye of a lot of groups, including the NAACP and almost like every civic association along the pike, and us. And there was a great deal of, I can't take much credit other than speaking at the county board meetings, but a lot of people, there's a lot of letters that were written from a lot of organizations, and it did convince the board to indefinitely postpone this amendment, which I think is a good thing. But it did raise a lot of questions about, well, why are we looking to redevelop this one particular part of Arlington? And, the board seems to think, well, we want to build more housing in Arlington, but why is it only this, we asked them to say, hey, why are we only considering trying to do this in this one specific low income area? So that was definitely postponed. We'll have to keep our eye on it because you don't know what they're going to do in the future. But I think that was good news. The other thing I wanted to talk about, unrelated, there was a meeting about the Virginia Green New Deal that I participated in last Thursday. There's not a whole lot of interesting things to come out of that other than that they're going to try to pass it again this year. And they're going to, in terms of things that we can do, they're going to have some coordinated outreach days, and a bunch of the people they're trying to target. These are trying to find state level electeds to co-sponsor the bill. I know I couldn't find my notes, but I know they mentioned Alfonso Lopez and Rip Sullivan, and not Barbara Favola, but who's the other state senator for Arlington?
Jan Howell.
Okay, that wasn't it. Maybe I'm thinking.
Adam Evan.
Yes, him. As targets of people they want to try to get to support this bill. There's a bill passed last year, wasn't very good. The Clean Economy Act, I think it was called. So we talked about that a lot last year. But if you're interested in, I will definitely send out an email to the group when I hear more about what specific dates they want people to reach out and specific tactics and things like that. But it seems like they're going to be pretty organized and they have some strategies here of the best way to try to put pressure on some of these electeds. So, stay peeled. That doesn't make sense. Keep your eyes peeled for emails.
Stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
Well, I mean, I guess I think that's all that we got from the steering committee. I don't know if there's anybody if anyone is still with us, but if there's anybody who'd like to share anything,
We can do our public comment.
Yeah, we can open it up if anybody wants to talk. I know people are probably pretty drained, but I'm going to mute my mic. Speak up.
So if anyone wants to write letters and postcards into Georgia, there's a campaign going forward, Reclaim Our Vote. You just Google Reclaim Our Vote, and and yes, you can order postcards and write into Georgia and help.
Detta, when is the runoff election in Georgia?
I think it's in January. I don't know. For some reason, January 5th pops into my head, but I'm not sure why.
I believe it is January 5th. That's what I remember reading.
Reclaim Our Vote.
Great. Maybe we can organize a nice Zoom meeting where we sit there and fill out the postcards and make snarky comments to each other. I don't know. There's no way to do these things communally anymore, huh? But yeah, thank you, Detta. I think that's actually a great. I think somewhat to some of the points made by David tonight. I think all of us should be taking some. It seems like a pretty low lift, so.
The only thing I wanted to say, Tim, it's been a great program, and I'm glad to see our Revolution Arlington back having programs. I haven't been following Facebook for a while, so I would have missed it. So I appreciated the reach out. But as the point you made earlier, I know that Falls Church had a meeting this morning. At the same time, and I guess it's just a question of talking to Stephen Spitz and those guys so that we coordinate, because it would have been great to have everybody, not conflict the event. But this is the normal Our Revolution Arlington time, so it's kind of their goof. But I hope we can all coordinate things so that because they had a good program too, I think.
Yeah, no, in hindsight, I mean, well, I don't know, our meeting kind of went long, but I had thought maybe originally we could have, because I know they wanted to talk about Virginia state level events in terms of what panned out here in terms of the elections, which would have been nice to incorporate in this. And I think maybe we can try to coordinate, for future meetings. But yeah, no, I agree. We need to work together a little bit better. I think frankly we need to our revolution groups really need to maybe pick some kind of, and I don't know whether this can be Green New Deal. I think that would be an easy one to organize around, but we really need something that we kind of all put our minds to, because it's just otherwise I feel like we're just always running around chasing one issue after another, and I think we all need to kind of coordinate better and do some kind of legislative push that's kind of coordinated.
Speaking of that, back in the spring, Cal with Our Revolution National had organized, combination with Our Revolution Arlington and Our Revolution Nova with Sandra and stuff, a big meeting to try to kind of combine or coordinate an Our Revolution Virginia, and it kind of didn't go that far. But Hal was having like weekly calls throughout the summer. I attended some of them, and I know you guys were invited. Have you looked at it and just said, nah, it's not the direction we want to go? We want to stay separate and concentrate on local stuff? Or is there a chance that we should contact Hal and try to organize an Our Revolution Virginia, or do something with it?
It would be great to have it. The biggest problem is, Andrew, is that we're volunteers. And I think a lot of us are just like so overwhelmed with, kind of our pet projects. And I've been just generally very committed to doing local things, because for me, my head explodes when I think about, trying to lobby, Don Beyer or Mark Warner or Kane on something federal. And even at the state level, it can be kind of hairy. I mean, we don't necessarily have the most progressive legislators here, even in Arlington. So, it's been easier for me psychologically to kind of focus on local issues. If we had people in our group that kind of wanted to pay sole attention to that kind of higher level and kind of keep us informed and direct us when there needs to be, some direct action, that would be great. But I frankly, I'm just kind of overwhelmed. I mean, that's the reason why I couldn't. I mean, and some of how things were happening, during the day when I was at work. So I was just, that's my excuse anyway.
Yeah, I mean, if there's people who want to get involved and help coordinate that, we would love to talk to you. I mean, that's something we'd love to do. It's just a bandwidth thing,
Certainly. One other comment go ahead, please.
This was such a good meeting, and I'm just wondering whether if other groups are doing similar things, whether we should do something like one Zoom with one excellent speaker and then break out into our individual, more local meetings. I don't know if that's a possibility.
I don't see why we couldn't do that. I think it's just a matter of coordinating. And I don't know. I think that the pandemic has really decimated our kind of membership. It seems like, or at least in terms of people who have been active lately. And we have fewer people and more work to do, kind of. So, if there are people in the group that want to try to do that kind of coordinating, I would love for them to do it. That's all I'm saying. I know it's not going to be you, Detta, by any means. I'm not trying to suggest you should do it, but yeah, it's just been tough time. So, Andrew is absolutely right. We should be doing more coordinating. It's just we're kind of in the horns of a dilemma in that the active people are too active to do it ultimately. So I don't know if feels like they want to volunteer to do that, and maybe we can put it out to the larger list. If there are people who are interested in doing that kind of more high level. I know Jeff Elkner had wanted to do it initially, but I think Jeff, bless him and all, but he has a tendency to overcommit. And he's got so many things going on, so I don't know that he kept up with that. If he hasn't kept me abreast of what's been going on. So.
One other thing, Tim, I heard someone mention Alphonse Lopez, and I was just wondering what the general sense of this group is of opinion for him. And the reason I ask is that one of the members, I'm sure she's come to our Revolution Arlington meetings in the past, and she was active with the Bernie campaign. Karishma Mehta has put her hat in the ring to run against him. So I was just wondering whether there'd be interest among our group to support her candidacy, or whether we have a strong opinion in favor of Alphonse.
Well, I would just hold my tongue on Alfonso, but
I can't speak for the group, but sorry, Tim, go ahead.
We've already we've been in touch with Karishma, and she's actually she was at least a member as of the a few months ago, which I think she'd attended more than enough meetings with our group to be a member. But she has been in touch with us. We're going to have her come address the group. Probably, I'm thinking it's probably gonna be in January. But we have our what's the word?
Endorsement?
So I was trying to think of the our bylaws basically state that if she wants an endorsement from us, we'll send a slip over to Alfonso. If he wants to be considered, we'll wait and get those, and then we'll have a vote. I mean, that's just how we've done it in the past. Personally, I would I know Karishma and worked with her a lot of stuff, and I'd be happy to support her personally. But in terms of our Revolution as a group, then we'll have to follow our bylaws process at this point.
Oh, and speaking of Karishma, that reminds me. She's hoping to get more involved. She's trying to get mutual aid efforts off the ground here in Arlington. In particular, right now, last I talked to her, she's hoping to get community fridges set up, and I've been in touch with her about that. I should actually text her after this meeting, because she said she was going to get back with a call, a date to talk to me, but she's hoping we can, sort of do something with her to promote and facilitate, implement her mutual aid efforts, which is something I'm interested in doing.
Excellent.
I should add, if I'll get back in touch with her. I'll see if she gets back in touch with me. But if anyone is interested in getting involved with that, just send me a message on Facebook, or if you have my email, I believe everyone does.
Dan, put your email in the chat.
Yeah. Let me do that. Yeah, so if you want to get involved with this, just shoot me an email, and I'll keep you. I can loop you in any emails we have. I can let you know about any updates as they occur.
Great, and I'll send a follow-up email that mentions all this to the group. So,
thanks, guys.
Well, I guess if nobody else has anything else to add, I think we can close. Thanks everyone for attending. As David said, it's up to us to make the change that we want to see in the world. So, and whether that's at the local level, or the state level, or federal level, hopefully at all three, it's going to require action on our part. And I thank all of you who have come out to play whatever part you have. The actions that we've done, recently and historically. Yeah, I mean, stay tuned, and we'll have another meeting next month. Hopefully, I'm trying to put together a kind of small panel on small business, which actually I think is a good follow-up to the talks of monopoly here. So if more information on that coming soon, hopefully. And that's it, I guess. So I'm going to sign off. Take care, everyone. Peace and love.
Thanks, guys.
And see you soon.
Great
Bye,
meeting.
everybody.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thanks.